Thank you, Mr. Technip. And moving on to trustees, Mrs. Lucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are getting ready for our annual conference this week in Columbus for the Ohio Township Association, where we get to spend some time with our state legislators, network with other township officials, and attend very good presentations, which gives us a lot of insight when we come back here to serve our community. So we look forward to that. Should be another great meeting. I was happy to hear that Mr. Rose's first coffee with the administrator was a great turnout. He shared some great feedback with us that we found very helpful. We appreciate those questions, the feedback from our residents. I think we took this job because we know that township form of government is the most accessible to the people. So that is one great example, and we hope to have more of those, have more one-on-one with people that helps us and helps your community. So please continue to see Mr. Rose at his coffee hour, and hopefully I get invited to be one of your guests very soon. We did have some correspondence from a few residents regarding road conditions on Cascade, some power outage issues, which I believe Mr. Rose may cover in his report. And also same concerns about reductions in our law enforcement, which we may discuss later as well. We did have a staff meeting last week where we discussed some proposed reductions in payroll and equipment for our fire department and discussed some upcoming recreation activities, which I'm sure Mr. Supler will talk about in his report. Other than that, I wanted to say happy belated birthday to you. Happy birthday coming up to you, Morgan. And last but not least, I did become a grandmother, as everyone knows, to my little grandson, Cole. It was beautiful, and I'm feeling very blessed. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mrs. Lucci. Mr. McIntosh.
Well, thank you. Well, again, congratulations. You sort of stole my thunder on becoming a grandmother. We're very excited about that.
Thank you.
Did have something that the JED board took up recently, and last week the board agreed to contract with a consulting agency that is going to work in conjunction with the property owner of the Quail Hollow Hotel. And that's something that from time to time we get a lot of complaints. When are you going to do something about? We get a lot of that. And to be clear, the township doesn't have the legal authority as a township to talk about what we can and can't do. Is there's not a lot of, we do everything we can. The fire department's in there enforcing the fire code. We're on top of that. But when it comes to the building stuff, that's county. We're a township. We don't have necessarily some of the maintenance or ordinances because we're a township. But what we contracted with this consultant to do is to take a look at the property. They're going to work with the owner to do an assessment of whether or not, the building's salvageable. And we've had a lot of the local developers sort of reach out and kind of mince ideas with, I know the trustees have talked to everybody about building it back up as a hotel, repurposing it to some kind of living or mixed use type thing, taking it all the way down and turning that property to housing. So nobody's really come up with an idea. So what we're looking for this consultant is to kind of blank sheet, whiteboard it, Blue Ocean Strategies, kind of take a look at what is it suited to be based on its location and come up with some recommendations. And then again, do an assessment of the challenges of the property, the viability of the structure. So we should get a comprehensive report. And again, the administrator of the JED has reached out to the owners. They're going to cooperate with that process. So that's one of the things the JED, I know people don't maybe understand everything that we do on the JED board, but that's the economic development tool. And the JED has its own budget, and we're going to fund it, or the funding for this project is going to be done from the JED budget. And then we've asked them to get it done by the time the JED board goes to the ICS show in Las Vegas. So we'll have an idea, and that's where we're going to get an audience with developers and people that might be looking to do something with that. So, we're not waving a magic wand here, and there's no silver bullet, but we're doing everything in our power as the government to sort of help facilitate development of that eyesore in Concord. And I hope that people take that as a positive step for us. Had a lot of conversations. We continue to discuss safety at our staffing meeting, working with our departments on budgets and whatnot. I know that was a big part of Andy's coffee with the administrator, and it was very timely. That has worked out fantastic. I think it was great. I wanted to try to make it, didn't, but it sounds like it went really well. I'm glad that people showed up, glad that people asked questions, and we were able to spread some information. I know that we're trying to engage more social media, and we're getting interactions to explain what's going on, and that's really positive. And I know Andy worked really hard with First Energy to run down, and we ended up getting a nice comprehensive report about some power problems. So I want to thank him for taking that and getting that done finally. It's been a long-going problem, and we'll be connecting with the community to explain what's going on there. I continue to work on the local government fund ad hoc committee. That's moving along. It's going to be a process that'll take most of the year, and I'm really looking forward to getting down to Columbus to meet with our legislators and spend some time in some good sessions. They're always very informative, and you come back armed with new ideas about doing a better job in the township. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. McIntosh. Yeah, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Rose on his first successful coffee with an administrator. I know that, I got some feedback from him after. And as you both know, there were some concerns from a lot of residents about the cuts to our safety services, specifically police and fire, and seemed to be some confusion on actually what the role of the sheriff is in the county and how that role impacts townships. So I thought I'd take a few minutes in my comments here this evening to just go over the role of the sheriff, since I spent 25 years of the first 31 that I've done in for full-time law enforcement there, and served the residents of Concord where I grew up. So I just thought I'd take a few minutes. By law, the sheriff's main responsibility is command and control of the jail facility, and also he's responsible for responding to emergencies and restoring peace. It's sort of a very vague statute, but how that impacts townships is that, most municipalities, villages, cities, they have their own police departments. A lot of townships in the state, as well as Lake County, don't have their own police departments. So the sheriff was responsible for staffing law enforcement services in the townships and responding to emergencies as they came up and restoring order. Now, in Lake County, the sheriff in Lake County there's a significant number of law enforcement disciplines that are provided in Lake County. They run a court services division, which is responsible for the security and inmate movement to cases within the Court of Common Pleas, and also other courts within the jurisdiction of the county, municipal courts. So they have several officers assigned to that division that work in court services. There's a patrol division, which I'll expound on a little bit in a few minutes. Also in the Sheriff's Department, is a result of certain patrol officers. They have a detective bureau. The detective bureau is made up of, I believe we have 6 or 7 detectives there right now that are still in the bureau, and those guys serve on different task force. There's an opiate task force in Lake County. There's some other internet crimes against children task force that these officers are assigned to. So besides the detective bureau, there's a full tri-county SWAT team that Lake County is in charge of, that services not only Lake County but Ashtabula and Geauga counties. It provides mutual aid for other departments that request that. A dive team, Marine Patrol unit, a mounted unit, and now most recently we have officers that are permanently assigned to the new Lake County Police Firearms Training Facility over at the lake, behind the Lake County dump, that's available for training for all law enforcement personnel. So with that, how does that impact, or if I can explain a little bit better, how that law enforcement service translate to patrol within the townships. Like I said, the sheriff has a responsibility to respond to emergencies, and those emergencies are usually in the unincorporated areas of Concord Township, Perry Township, Leroy, and Perry Township. To give you an idea of how that translates to staffing for patrol, you really need, going back to 2008, prior to that, the road patrol pretty much responded to every call for service in the townships. After the housing crash in 2008, what transpired is there had to be significant cuts in the county budget, and a lot of that, the biggest part of the county budget is the sheriff's department. So what they had to do is they had to cut staffing at the road patrol, and it was moved from the general fund to a line item for a specific amount of money. And what happened was the county agreed to fund 12 road patrol deputies, and at that point in time, after that, the sheriff went out to the townships and asked them to engage in a contract for patrol services. So you separate emergencies, which were identified as, I'll give you an example, crimes in progress, domestic violences, injury accidents, things where people need immediate assistance. The sheriff provided that, without any cost to the residents. But if you want a patrol, which, there's two types of patrol. There's proactive or reactive. Proactive patrol is having patrol officers that are inserted within the township or the community, going out, trying to identify crime before it happens, making traffic stops, where you get warrants, drug activity, people that are looking to commit crimes, instead of reactive, which is just responding to the call after it happens, okay? So when we initially were involved in working with the townships, I was a command level officer at that point in time, the executive officer there, and it was recommended that Painesville Township and Concord Township would work towards eventually paying for 10 deputies in each township. So how does that equate to what kind of service does that give a township of 20,000 residents in Concord Township? So you need 5 full-time officers to get 1 deputy 24/7, 365 days a year. So if we were to, getting to 10 would give us 2 full-time officers 24/7, 365. And that's what all the townships have worked toward. Painesville and Concord, both 10. Perry was looking to work towards 5. Leroy couldn't commit to any contract. And over the years, they started building on initially 5. I think they went to 6. Then when there was a safety levy that was passed, we grew those numbers over the last several years, and we got to the point where we're at 9. And there was a result of the recent failure of the levy, which I hear from many people that I talked to, and we heard some feedback at the coffee with the administrator. A lot of that language was confusing. Maybe people didn't actually know what was being asked. But as a result of that, we had to make some cuts and move from 9, where we were at, down to 6. So really, what does that equate to? It gives us a little over 1 officer, 24 hours a day, 365, in a community that's almost 20,000 people, which is, in my opinion, a professional opinion, it's not significant enough to cover this township. We have a lot of residential development. We got a lot of business. I know small villages within the county that are running, 2 full-time officers, a day. So you get 1 officer that gets tied up,
Right.
on a significant call, like an injury accident or a DUI or a priority call. If somebody needs assistance, they might have to wait, or they might have to call for mutual aid. So it's a daunting task to try to, in today's day and age, to retain and keep good law enforcement officers. So it's very beneficial for the townships, in my opinion, to contract with the sheriff, because to have the overhead of running your own police department, one building, maintenance, the IT is huge, radios and equipment, cars. I mean, you're talking, probably at least in Concord Township over $7-8 million to start a police department. And here we're paying, I think right now we're close to $900,000 for this, about $1 million for the services with the sheriff. And what do we get for that? You get priority emergency response, you get patrol officers. We need to increase that, we know that, but you get a lot of things that we don't have overhead on. You get a prosecutor 24/7 that's on duty. You can call for any type of questions. The county insures the officers. We get administrative services. We get supervision. We get fleet, the vehicles, the fleet maintenance. That's not our cost. We get a SWAT team if we need a SWAT team. If the cases are stacking up in Concord Township, we're not keeping our patrol deputies. If we had our own department in here, we have a detective bureau that those cases are given to, and guys are working those cases so that patrol officers can stay in the community and where they need to be visible and vigilant and work in the community. So I just thought I'd give a little bit of an overview because there's some confusion about what services the sheriff provides and how that equates and what translates to what Concord gets. We're going to talk about going back to the drawing board and probably trying to work with citizens within the community to get some feedback back and see how we get back to where we need to be as far as the resources within Concord Township.
I think it's important that the residents know, and we've talked a lot about the funding here and different things, and I know there's residents that are very informed on local government fund and some that don't know what that is and the JED and so forth, but there's obviously multiple things that we use, and we've talked about doing multiple things to try to alleviate it. Mr. Dondorf and I went to the commissioners and sort of made a pledge that the townships have continued to grow in the East End, not just Concord, but all of them have grown. And that is the statutory responsibility of the Lake County Sheriff is to handle these things as Mr. Dondorfer laid out. We've had these communities grow. We've had the Concord's business district develop, and that's created more pressure, and the county's portion of that has remained static for the last 14 years. And so we will look to them to ask for some more support there. The bottom line is that we have a shortfall in our safety budget that we're getting through this year. But one of the things is we're going to have to come back at some point and look at another levy. I think that I know we've been telling people that we're working on funding and it's always kind of scary, but the bottom line is our funding is at a point where there's no way we're going to get help and so forth. And it's really going to boil down to how much we end up needing to. I think it's very unclear at this point what we're going to be asking. We know what we asked last time. We know what the shortfalls are. I know a resident today on social media was asking, well, how come your appropriations don't show the shortfall? Well, townships we're not the federal government. We can't spend deficit. So when we present a budget and appropriations, it's going to be to spend what we have. It isn't going to show a shortfall. It's our internal working documents that have, here's what we were last year and here's what we have now. And so we start going through with red line and making those numbers meet the budget. That's how it works in a township. So we won't be able to demonstrate specifically. You have to just come in and sit down and talk to us to get a real specific answer on that.
Right.
But a levy is going to be part of the funding solution at some point. We're going to have to do that. And there's no way around it, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, like you said, we've gone, we understand, that we're going to have to go back to our residents and have some dialogue and move forward on how we're going to sustain and increase our level of services. But at the same time, like you said, we went to the county and discussed with them how it's important that we collaborate and work on this issue together. And the county, is hopefully going to work towards increasing their contribution as far as the number of deputies that they're going to fund. But this is a situation and a dire time for the profession of not only fire but also law enforcement. I mean, it's important to protect the employees that you have right now in this field. And we couldn't forecast when the safety levy was passed years ago that what was going to happen, with COVID and the significant increases in salaries and costs to maintain these employees. And not only that, you're battling the issue of, outside agencies looking to laterally transfer your staff to another department because there's just no new blood coming into the profession. So, these guys have a lot of value, and not only if you lose them, the amount of experience that you lose is detrimental.
Lake County had that problem. The sheriff's department went through that last a year or two ago. They had a bunch of the correction staff get poached to Geauga County. So we know that if we're not competitive at the sheriff's department, that we're going to lose deputies to other agencies. And I did ride-alongs. Carl, these guys, and I know Trustee Hillier from Painesville Township did. These are fantastic, professional people, and we don't want to risk losing them or not getting them back. It's imperative that we work with the county, that we work with our residents to get the funding we need and keep quality law enforcement in this community, because if we don't get that, that as an elected leader of this community, it's a scary thought to not be able to fund what we need.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just still worth mentioning that the revenue from 2016, when we had our safety services levy, it's just not enough to afford the increased costs. And the amount of deputies that Mr. Dondorfer feels is, in his professional opinion, to have one deputy out there at one time just seems sort of ludicrous to me in this big community. So to get where we need to go, it's just going to take some more funding.
There's I can't think there's a community in Concord or in all of Lake County that has nearly 20,000 people in it. It's 24 square miles big that allocates one law enforcement officer to that, and has a commercial business district,
Right.
like we have, that had and traffic, and we have an interstate and a big state highway, and we have one law enforcement officer. Now we get support because the sheriff's obligated to deal with that work, but proactively speaking, there's only one car assigned to this. I mean, the city of Mentor is only a few miles bigger than we are, and they've got 7 or 8 officers on at any given time.
Yeah, and with the county funded deputies, you're looking at a little over 2 cars on a day. It could be a supervisor or a rove unit, but those cars are good. They work on backing up the townships and the officers so they don't jeopardize their safety if there's a serious call. But some of the other stuff that the sheriff has to do, and a lot of more and more I see recently is there's a lot of inmate movement that gets. People that have to be transported to the hospital or doctor's appointments from the jails, those deputies can get tied up on those transports quite a bit. So
when that's 55,000 people, or 80,000 people and 55 square miles, all of the townships too. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of real estate for the sheriff to cover.
So we're looking forward to working with the community as we move forward and try to figure out how we're going to get back to where we need to be. So moving on, I will go into department reports with the administrator, Andy Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Dondorfer, members of the board, Mr. Technip, good evening. I'll start with a few items that are on the agenda. Item A is a